Welcome, everybody. My name is Patricia Wickman, and I am the director of the Radiant Living Online School of Ayurveda that is beginning in January of 2015. And I'm here today with the Queen of Herbs. Her name is Sonia Masocco, and I'm very excited. Sonia reached out to me when she saw this online school project that I was doing and graciously agreed when I asked her if she would be a guest teacher in my school. So everybody who's part of the full Ayurvedic Health Counselor training will have access to her teachings. She'll be coming into the school mainly in month 5 when we talk about Ayurvedic herbalism. And all of the guest teacher lectures, I'm going to record those and offer those to people who are participating in the Lite program as well. So just a little bit about Sonia. She is a professional member of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, or NAMA, the Association of Ayurvedic Practitioners of North America, as well as a member of the American Herbalist Guild. She taught for 8 years at the Ayurvedic Institute, which is Vasant Lad's school in Albuquerque. And she currently teaches clinical herbalism at the University of New Mexico and maintains a private practice in Albuquerque. Ms. Masocco has been involved in complementary and alternative health since 1997, where she also worked in an integrative clinic in Hong Kong. She completed Ayurvedic studies at the Ayurvedic Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and continued Ayurvedic studies in Pune, India. Sonia's teaching style is dynamic and stimulating, and she knows how to make accurate information come alive and be applicable. So thank you very much for joining me, Sonia.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, actually.
Yes.
It's such a pleasure. I love teaching about herbs and I love teaching about Ayurveda, so this is a perfect match.
Perfect. And I was
Yes.
impressed with the questions that you asked when you were wondering about my school. It seems like you really do have a gift for bringing in creative teaching methods into the classroom. Can you talk about that a
Well,
little
you
bit?
see, it is very true. I must say, when I first started studying Ayurveda, it was so, I would say, academic and a little bit on the stale side. And it really took years to put it into practice because it was so bland, or it was rich on one hand but it not really applicable. So it's really been my thing to make it a little bit more applicable, especially because I do have a practice. I had a practice before I started studying Ayurveda, and to really put these things in practice for me was very important. And so to teach it also in a way that is engaging is also very important.
Right.
So
So, can you give an example? I'm envisioning that when you teach, you don't just stand up and, here are the 6 tastes and just lecture endlessly. How,
oh, no, absolutely not. Most likely, if we have the 6 tastes, we have 6 different things that we can taste that would have those tastes. And I always want to bring things back to reality, because to me, it's very important that people realize that you can't always be using only herbs that come from India. And there might be a time where we might not have access to herbs. So we should be knowing what we're doing by action and by taste. And so making that applicable to either a Western herb or to a food or to a food group, that really makes sense. And once you learn it, there is no disassociating from it. It's because it's really easy to associate one thing to another just by knowing what the taste is or what we're looking for. It's
sure.
when I used to teach at the Ayurvedic Institute, I brought in a different number of things as well, not only bringing the herbs, but also making people debate over why they should take one herb or not. And also we had crossword puzzles. That way you could learn from a different angle. I've been contributing to a book, and so there we have also, a lot of different types of tests, and multiple choices. That way people actually work with the information more than just read it or study it on their own. It's very difficult, and I always don't encourage people to study herbs on their own. Herbs, essential oils, these are things that really need to have an organoleptic type knowledge. You need to be present with it, understand it, taste it, and kind of be with the plant and the plant matter to really get it. On the other hand, there's going to be the experience of the practitioner that you cannot get in a book. And there are so many herbs that can be used for the same function, but understanding why use one over another, this is also something that you can learn only with a real instructor and not through a book or just online on your own. So I'm really happy to be able to teach, and I'm also really grateful to have had great teachers that also were instrumental in this different way of learning.
Yes, that so resonates with my vision for this school.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel that I'm trained in classical Ayurveda, but I am so aware of the sustainability questions involved in
Right.
Ayurvedic herbalism and all of that, and I will be bringing in people who are talking about other modalities besides specifically Ayurveda, but they gel so well with the types of therapies I want to have. I want to have my students have access to or in their toolbox when they begin working with their clients.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Hmm.
No, I do think that there is this kind of modernization of Ayurveda that I think that you're doing with your program that is actually going to give a little bit more of a Western taste, but also be really applicable to the Western person in terms of how to use Ayurveda. Because I must say, people are usually not only open, and it might take a lot of years before they really understand the Vata Pitta Kapha and or eating this versus that. But if they understand the bigger picture, and then they learn different techniques and different tools with which to use these Ayurvedic concepts, this is truly the science of life.
Exactly. Yes. And I'll get the occasional client that'll hone in on I should eat this, I shouldn't eat that, and they turn it into a real kind of nitpicky, kind of neurotic
Right,
take on the doshas and what they're supposed to be doing. But there is
right,
this bigger picture that you're talking about that I really want
right.
to
In fact,
transmit.
one of the Vaidyas in Pune would say that you cannot be obsessed about what you eat or what you take. You should be obsessed about living. And so you can't be obsessed with your own health. You should be obsessed with living your
Mm-hmm.
life. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
Yes. I want to back
So,
up just a little bit, and I wonder if you have an example of a specific action of an herb that you've observed in one of your clients, or can you think of any specific case where what you're talking about has been applicable?
yes, well, so just a couple of years ago, I had a woman who's still my client, but basically she was extremely constipated, and as a result, was given many medications actually to actually help with her constipation. But rather than help with her constipation, these medications made her dependent on the medication. So she wanted to kind of change the way because she realized that she was still in her like late 20s and she didn't want to be reliant on medications for the rest of her life. So she actually came to me for herbs, and rather than sometimes just jumping on the herbs, I would say, well, first we have to look at if there's enough fluid, if there's enough fat, if there's enough fiber, if there's enough food, and Ayurveda would say, is there enough fire? So it's true that we can use things like licorice tea, or we can use, sati sabgol, which is basically psyllium, to help, lubricate and move the bowels. On the other hand, we also need to kind of change the way of eating and change the way of just doing things on a day-to-day basis. I must say, it took her a year, because she had been on these medications for over 10 years, it took her about a year to be totally non-reliant on the medication any longer. However, now she looks so much better. as so less dry. And actually, she doesn't really depend on herbs, because one thing you don't want to do is go from depending on medication to depending on herbs. That's still dependency. So to me, herbs are supposed to be there to kind of instigate the natural intelligence of the body, but definitely not to override it. And so as we help, we could use them as helpers, but not to let them override the system unless it's actually necessary.
Yeah, what is my experience too? I'm interested that you didn't mention Triphala, which is kind of the catch-all herbal formula for constipation,
Right.
and which is very readily available to people. It just health food stores and health food store employees are just handing out Triphala. My personal
Right.
experience with that is that Triphala alone does not, Triphala has many other actions besides helping with constipation, and it does that, but it just on its own doesn't solve the problem for people. What do you think
Right.
about that?
Exactly. Well, I must say I'm not a big Trifala fan, um, because there are 9 different varieties basically of Trifala, and what we find in the market is just a standardized one fits all. And Trifala means 3 fruits: Haritaki, Bibitaki, Amalaki. And dependent on what dosha you have predominant, you would actually have a different variation of the percentage of the Amalaki, Bibitaki, Haritaki. But obviously, in order to make things commercial and tridoshic, we actually have a product that is in the market that is not really suitable truly for all. And so I usually don't, I hesitate sometimes to recommend Triphala, and I usually recommend Triphala the way it's done to mainly people of Vata, Pitta type of constitution, and hardly ever to people of a Kapha constitution, because they might find that product a little bit constipating instead of alleviating constipation. So, um, so although it might be a product that is commercially widely available, I might say it might not be the best choice for everybody. But it is true, this is actually one way that Ayurveda is getting, its name out there. So, there are some products which, like using a neti pot. People are associating neti pot use to Ayurveda rather than yoga. People are using Triphala, but anybody recommends Triphala. You don't necessarily need to be an Ayurvedic practitioner to be recommending Triphala. And there are people that are recommending holy basil for everything, or turmeric for everything. But it's not necessarily always the case that that might be the best medicine. So I think once people understand what is behind the recommendation, then they can kind of make their own assessment. I always hear people using turmeric as a great anti-inflammatory. Well, turmeric is a heating substance, so maybe it might be a great anti-inflammatory, but for somebody that's already having heat issues, it might not be the ideal medicine. So, all of these herbs have their little insights that somebody needs to really understand at a deeper level. Yeah.
Great. Yes, I'm so excited to have you as a guest teacher. I felt that was one aspect when I got done with my practitioner training that I still needed. Well, I think there's a book out on the market, something like How to Become an Herbalist in just under 75 years or something like that. So I think it's common
Right.
for people to feel what I felt, which was
Well,
I'm not ready. I don't know, but um,
it might be true that people might not feel ready, and it is true that there's a lot of information that needs to be um, understood in terms of what we call Dravya Guna Vijnana, which is basically the knowledge of the substance and its characteristics and its potencies, and also drug herb interactions. But on the other hand, I say, who would be a better herbalist when it comes to Ayurvedic herbs? It should be the Ayurvedic practitioner, because the Western practitioner doesn't have the entire, and I am a Western herbalist, so I can tell you, in general, when you study Western herbalism, you don't study the entirety of the paradigm of the body as much as you study it in Ayurveda. So although you might learn anatomy, physiology, you might learn pathology, the interrelationships of Vata, Pitta, Kapha and or the dhatus or the tissues, these are not really viewed in Western herbalism. And in terms of heating potency, cooling potency, post-digestive effect, these are not things that are usually taught in any Western herbalism class because it's just not even discussed. So who better to recommend Ayurvedic herbs than an Ayurvedic practitioner? So I think we need to really discard the veil and really delve into learning the information to make it more applicable. But there's nobody better qualified than an Ayurvedic practitioner to make recommendations on Ayurvedic herbs.
Right. And I'm even going a little leap of logic here and thinking that once an Ayurvedist learns about Western herbs too, they also have this extra qualification for dealing with Western herbs too.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I must tell you, when I teach the clinical herbalism at the university, we cover both Western herbs and Ayurvedic herbs. But I always go back to the Ayurvedic model. And so even the Western herbs now, we view them in terms of taste, potency, post-digestive effect, and what they will do overall to the dosha. Because a lot of people will say, take this bitter herb. But, a bitter herb in the long run will aggravate Vata. So it doesn't matter if the bitter herb is a Western herb or if it's an Ayurvedic herb. It will always aggravate Vata in the long run. That's just the nature of bitter. So, it's very important that to have the understanding, and it really works well when wrapped in the Ayurvedic envelope. That's actually what got me to Ayurveda, because when I was working in Hong Kong in the alternative healthcare clinic, I was working more with essential oils, but they were not always responding the way they were supposed to be responding. And the reason they weren't responding was because of this quality issue. So maybe I was using an anti-inflammatory with a person that was hot by nature, and this anti-inflammatory happened to be rosemary and ginger, which are heating substances. Well, obviously, this is not going to work very well. This might work very well on a person that has a lot of cold, but not in a person that is heated by nature. So actually understanding the nuances of how to apply the herbs, and also know what are the resources available to check the drug-herb interactions, because most people that we know are on some type of medication. This is going to be, key, but you can also be a very effective practitioner by knowing these herbs.
Right. Yes, I have so many. I have now, based on what you've said, about 100 other questions I would love to ask you. And I can't wait to really dive deep with you in our classroom on these issues. And I'm just so grateful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's an interesting journey, and I always find it's like a never-ending journey, because you start and then it's like, oh, what about this and what about that? But basically, I always say we have to start with a few. So normally in a first class we say, well, let's start with 10 or let's start with 20 herbs, learn how to use those very well. If you start learning how to use those very well with different methods of preparations, you have a really good formulary. You have a really good apothecary already.
Yeah.
Then you can always add, but we have to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. It's true that by now my apothecary holds over 200 herbs, but that's just because we, do many things here. But in reality, if I would only be given even 2 or 1, most likely, with a variety of methods of preparations, we can actually do very many things. So you don't necessarily need to have a number or an exotic collection of herbs. We can just have very few and know how to work with them inside out.
Yes.
And by doing that,
Mm.
you can really achieve very many things.
Right. I don't have it handy right now, but the NAMA, the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, gave me a list of the herbs that they want their first year Ayurvedists, the Ayurvedic health counselors, to be able to understand and use. And it's not more than
Perfect.
20. So, yeah,
Perfect.
yeah,
That's a perfect number.
yeah.
And then again, in Ayurveda, we say that for something to be a true medicine, it has to be available, it has to be sustainable, it has to be able to be done in multiple ways, in multiple forms, and it has to be a gift to someone. That is, it should have an action, a clear, determined action, either helps them or depletes them or, rejuvenates them, something. So, but this thing about having to be able to be made in multiple forms is very important. That is, you can have dashamula. You can have dashamula as a tea. You can have dashamula in oil. You can have dashamula in a tincture. You can have a dashamula as an asava. You can have, you could actually grind it up. You can probably make even a paste out of it. So basically, knowing what to do in the various forms of one single herb can allow you a multitude of levels of reaching different types of things. So basically, I'm really happy that they did limit it to 20, because the list otherwise can be ridiculous, 450 or something. But basically, if you know then how to make a ghee, or how to make a tincture, or how to make an oil, or how to use it in the kitchen, these things are going to be the way that we start using and applying the knowledge, because the knowledge is nothing unless it's applied.
Right. Yes. And this will be interesting in an online format. I'll be giving um, video demonstrations or whatnot on how to do different herbal preparations, and then everybody in their individual homes are going to be having to experiment. Um, but
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
we'll
But you
figure it
know
out.
what? I did a series, a webinar that was called From Garden to Gifts, basically. And it was all about preparations that you can do from your garden. So, like how to make, a mixture of eau de Provence, or how to make, a medicated vinegar, or how to make a medicated oil, how to make and as long as the people on the other side know what's coming, they can get themselves organized. But it's really fun when you start making like rose petal jam, online, but then you learn how to make it at home. It's really nice.
Oh, it's
So,
exciting. And it's exciting
yeah.
to me that I'll be teaching how to do it from Texas, or you'll be teaching from New Mexico, and then somebody over in
Right.
Ireland is going to be doing it. So,
Executing it. Yes, it's going to be
exactly.
fantastic.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Well,
Yeah.
it's been such a pleasure, and I just know that once people see this introduction, they're just going to want, if they're like me, they're going to want more. What does Sonia have? What is she going to teach us?
What is she
And
going to come up with
yeah,
next?
what
Yes. You
exactly.
know, I really like to make this applicable and practical, because I have a lot of respect for plant matter, and I really don't like plant matter to be wasted. So a lot of times people order many, many more herbs than they'll actually ever use. I'd rather narrow it down to the herbs that we will use, and have a multitude of preparations that we can make out of those herbs that we will use. But because I'm a grower, I'm a distiller, and I also make products, I really have a lot of respect for plant matter, and I never want it to be wasted. So it's going to be important for us to learn how to work with plant matter in order not to waste it, because it's really a precious commodity.
I love that. Yes,
So
it is so precious. And
it is
I'm
so precious.
Yeah, and when I was first learning about herbs, I was struck by how each herb really has like a spirit, a personality, a flavor to it, and energy. It's
Yes,
amazing.
and
Mm.
the thing is, it's not only that they have the flavor and the personality, but we will go also, when we have this list, and whichever the specifics are, um, a lot of them have myths behind them or stories of the Padma Puranas. And so sometimes learning those stories are very helpful to learning that plant. So because it really gives a little more, sheds a little more light on the action of the plant. So although it might be mythology or it might be allegory, or it might be like folkloric wisdom, sometimes part of it helps even remembering what that plant can do. So,
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
yeah. So
I
we'll have a
remember
lot of
there was an
plants.
Indian woman in our group who told us the story behind Ashok and or Ashoka,
Mm-hmm.
and that has stuck with me.
Ashoka,
Yeah,
yes.
we won't say it here
Right.
because we want people to join the school, and you will tell these
Absolutely.
stories, right?
But there's so many stories, and it's really it's fascinating. It truly is fascinating.
Yes,
So
yes.
yes.
Well, very
And
good.
one thing I want to remind people is that it's very difficult in general to think of digesting a dry herb that has been basically sitting on a boat for 2 to 3 months. Okay. So, in general, we need to prepare it in some way to make it digestible. So don't think that your dried, dehydrated ginger is going to have as much as an effect as some type of preparation of ginger. A preparation of ginger is already pre-digested. It will actually act faster and better than a dried herb. So in general, what we will need to be learning is also how to make these things come alive again. So
Very good.
I'm looking forward to these classes and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you,
Me
actually.
too, me too. May seems so far away now. We might have to
Well,
have
but
you come
time
in a little
flies.
bit sooner to give us some little,
Time
yeah,
flies when we're having fun.
yes,
But you do need to understand the basics of Ayurveda to have a better understanding of herbs. So
right,
May is might not be too soon once we start learning the Ayurvedic component of it.
right, right.
So
Well, thank you so much, Sonia, for your time today, and I am
you are so much
delighted.
welcome.
I'm delighted to meet you
Yes,
and have you be a part of this wonderful project. Now, if people do
right.
want to start learning about you, connecting with you before May, how can we find you? Where do you have a
Well,
website?
I do have a website. I do have a website which is soniamasocco.com. Very simple. There are some recorded lectures at soniamasoccoedu.com. And those are more kind of pathology driven. So it's like you would need to know not only Ayurveda, but also some pathologies to go there. But, we're here in New Mexico. We're actually all over the internet because I'm the only Sonia Masocco apparently. So there are plenty of ways to contact us.
Okay,
Our phone number here is 505-296-5737.
great. And your website address is
It's soniamasocco.com and email is info@soniamasocco.com.
okay, and that's MASOCCO.
OCCO.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Sonia
wonderful.
Masocco. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Okay.
Sonia. And I will
You are
be in
so
touch.
welcome.
Okay,
All
take
right.
care.
Take care.
Namaste.
Namaste all. Bye.
Bye bye.